Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Monday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. This is going to be a very busy show. There is a lot coming up, so hopefully you guys are along for the ride, because this one going to cover a lot of ground as we look at week 2 in the NFL. It is all wrapped up with the exception of one game. Plus, we have a CFL recap where I can't figure out what's happening in that league anymore. Then UFC 306, the UFC put on a show. Their fighters, maybe not so much. Canelo Alvarez with a dominant performance, and then we get ready for another big weekend in boxing before the NBA and NHL previews continue today. NBA will be looking at players who have a chance to break out, and NHL will be looking at some overvalued teams. If I wanted to do the clickbaity SEO thing, which I absolutely did when I was on 960 earlier today, we are going to look at the most overrated teams in the NHL, and going to close the show with a look at the potential breakout players for the Calgary Flames. So, it's a lot. Let's get right into it and talk some football. All right, the NFL week is basically done as we await Monday Night Football tonight with the Eagles taking on the Falcons, and I was going to say we learned a lot from the NFL last week or yesterday. I don't know if we did. We certainly saw a lot. And that is, I guess, my first little gripe here. I put this out on Twitter yesterday. 10 games in the early slate is too much. It is just, it is simply too much. Scott Hansen, I don't think, took a breath for 3 hours in those early ones. And admittedly, I didn't love how they handled all of that necessarily, but I did a full, not teardown, but critique of one broadcast entity already in the instant reaction to the Canelo thing. So we don't need to do another one here. But I like the sweet spot is always 8-4. And I get you don't like there are more games than that right now, but if we wanted to do 9-4, that's great. 3 in the late window, not enough. 10 in the early window, way too much. Way too many games to be going on. And like you just go through some of these scores from today, and I was just like, I barely remember any of the things that in some of these, and had to get a quick refresh with all of them. So let's dive into it. I think the big story of the weekend is the Kansas City Chiefs survive as they pick up a victory over the Cincinnati Bengals. It wasn't officiating that won this game for this team. I was surprised at how negative people were coming out of this performance for the Chiefs. People saying like, oh, the three-peat's in trouble, blah, 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 blah. I was like, did you not see the game we saw on Thursday? And then they won in this game. Like the offense felt inevitable at times, that they had a couple of turnovers that looked kind of gross. And yes, like they got bailed out on a pass interference call on 4th and 16, but it was a pass interference call that was pass interference. I don't get what the holdup is with Kansas City. And also, we fell into this trap last year where, oh, they're not the same. This team isn't as dominant. Mahomes is slipping. Kelsey's old. Andy Reid doesn't, no. And then they won the Super Bowl. Why are we doing this again? We know that this team, like, yes, they play with their food sometimes. And it cost it. They 11-6. They had to win on the road in the playoffs last year. They do not do the full throttle 17-game regular season because they know the most important games are the 3 to 4 that they play in January and into February. These just get them there. And so what they are doing is just get them there and trying to push forward that way. This is... Kelsey's going to be fine in the playoffs. Mahomes going to be fine in the playoffs. They are figuring out right now how to utilize Worthy and Rice and get these guys fully integrated into the offense. There is concern about Pacheco. Sounds like he's going to go on the IR, which will not be a short stint, that means. And so that is, I think, a bit of a concern for this team, because he was a really big part of what they were doing in that game against Cincinnati, and it was a big part of what we talked about on the Friday preview of how they were going to be able to do this. But no, let's chill. Kansas City's going to be fine. They're always fine. They do this every single game, every single year. I fell for it going into this where I thought, yeah, they're going to blow these guys out. They don't blow anyone out anymore. So we are like probably... It's no fun to bet against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs because that's just like how good they are. They're on the road against Atlanta next week. It's going to be tempting to be like, oh, Kansas City's going to crush Atlanta. -5, take that all day. They don't crush. They squeak these games out at the end. It'll be desperation, and then they really turn it on when we get into the winter months. On the Bengals side, that's a tough one to take, as they were right there with the Chiefs and not playing their best football, especially on the offensive side. The one note, like just from a fantasy football standpoint now, one note for this game, I am now very intrigued at how well teams have been able to move the ball on Kansas City utilizing their tight ends. Gesicki was a big part of what Cincinnati was able to do in moving the football in this game. Just looking to pull the stats up here real quick. Let's just see. Yeah, Gesicki was their leading receiver with 7 receptions for 91 yards. Sample another one, 3 catches for 28. So that is 119 yards to the tight end. And when you think back to the Baltimore game, who stood out? The tight end. It was likely. And so now next week, not that it was, oh, well, maybe I won't start Kyle Pitts, but I think that this is if we're looking at daily fantasy, if we are looking at regular fantasy football, I think that this is a matchup that we can maybe exploit against Kansas City and look to take advantage of that going forward. They have the Chargers in a couple of weeks, and they have been using tight ends a little bit more too. So just something I kind of noted for fantasy football. But for the Bengals, I think you come away with this from this game feeling a little bit positive about kind of longer term outlook in terms of like, can they be a Super Bowl contender this year? I am leaning more and more against that and feeling better and better. I think we took the under on them in the regular season. So I am feeling better about this. And I don't think they are a Super Bowl contender, but I don't think they are as bad as maybe 0-2 would suggest. And I certainly don't think they are as bad as a loss to the Patriots would suggest. But they do have to get going. The run game is not what it was last year. Zach Moss is just running into guys. Chase Brown looks like the more dynamic running back. That is something we talked about in fantasy, how that feels like it's going to kind of continue to grow and grow and grow as it goes on, when it just becomes more and more apparent who the better running back in that room is. But they are just kind of running into the back of the line a lot and getting kind of stuffed there. They have Washington next week. I'm not concerned about that matchup. This should be a bounce back for Cincinnati. But I do think that the defense is lacking some talent that the defense that took them to the Super Bowl a couple years ago had. Shifting gears to my favorite team now, the Vegas Raiders. I have no idea how they won that game. I watched the whole thing. I still don't know how they won. It was just at some point, Max Crosby's like, hey, you know what? Feel like being the best player on the field. And he went out and dominated. And then the offense it kept like little chunks. And then they're in the end zone. And it's like, they're going to win this game. Like, holy shit, they're going to win this game. I couldn't believe that the Raiders won. I couldn't believe that they were able to get a victory in that spot. So a very surprising outcome for the Vegas Raiders. I don't think there's anything actionable to take away from this. It's kind of what we talked about with this Raiders team, where you looked at the growth that they have with Gardner Minshew as the quarterback and just how they can, he's not the gunslinger that the hair and the mustache would lead you to believe. He's just going to get the ball to his main guys. And in this game, one of the main guys was Brock Bowers. And his development in this offense, I think, helps them out greatly, giving them another weapon. Myers was solid in this game. Adams with an amazing catch on the sideline helps to move the ball a little bit. And so they're getting a few more chunks than they had in the offense last year. But they're just going to hang around. The defense is good enough. They're going to bottle you up a little bit. The offense is going to try to not make mistakes. And when the offense does make mistakes, they are simply not good enough to make up for it. But if they can play just kind of a perfect brand of football, moving things up and down the field and just not turning the ball over, but not getting any big plays, they're going to be fine. The Raiders have Carolina this week. Raiders are 7-point favorites in that game. I would never take the Raiders -7. I don't care who you're playing against. But good for the Raiders to hold on. For Baltimore, there is some concern here. I do think Lamar is going to be fine. I do think that this offense is fine. Derrick Henry, again, looks okay, but not his regular dominant self. But they did kind of wear on this Raiders defense, it felt like, at times, and then Crosby bounced back and did what he did. But it felt like they were starting to really break the Raiders in that fourth quarter and then just couldn't put it away. The thing that worries me about Baltimore is the defense. And when we did the things that I'm worried I'm wrong about in the offseason, one of them was, I am worried that I'm going to be wrong, that Baltimore is just going to be fine because of all the losses they had on the offensive line, but in that defense. And I talked about how Queen going from Baltimore to Pittsburgh was the biggest free agency move of the offseason. I don't think I accounted for enough of how much of a problem that would be for Baltimore, but you can move the ball on Baltimore. And again, it is that middle of the field where teams have been able to take advantage so far. Baltimore now plays the Dallas Cowboys this week. I don't know. We'll talk about the Cowboys here in a second. I think Baltimore should be fine in that game, but holy hell, 0-3 would be a disaster for Baltimore. On the Cowboys, why did I think they'd be good? Why? Why did I talk myself into thinking that this team would be able to get going in this way? I don't understand what I was doing. Like they're an overrated team that beat an overrated team that has now lost to an overrated team. I don't know why I overvalued. Okay, well, maybe the Cowboys are going to do it. I think it was more overvaluing how bad I thought New Orleans was. But watching even a moment of that game, it's like, yeah, I forgot. I didn't think Dallas was going to be all that good. And to just assume that they were in a tier above New Orleans was a mistake. The Saints, I'm not buying it for a second. I think they got fat and happy off of Carolina. And now, again, I don't think Dallas is all that good. And so I'm going to need to see it a few more times from New Orleans before I buy into it. The one thing I do buy is this defense is good. They have Dennis Allen, who is a very good defensive-minded coach and is someone who can really help to grow this team moving forward defensively. But in terms of being a full head coach, no, he's not. He's not it, and Derek Carr isn't it. And I don't get how they're doing. The big thing is Kamara is looking good. From a fantasy standpoint, that's amazing. And Olave bounces back with a big game here. You needed that, Chris Olave owners, so that's good. On to Sunday Night Football. The Texans with a win over the Chicago Bears. I feel like I could use the word survive a lot of times this week because that's what it felt like a lot of these teams did. But for the Texans, it's way too many mistakes. It's too many false starts. It's too many just dumb penalties that sets this team back. And they do have the big plays that can break it off with Collins and Dell and Diggs and all of that. I was a little worried. And now Chicago is a good defense. And that is something that I can now, I was hesitant to pull the trigger on, assuming that before. We can go there now. The Bears are a good defense. The now concern is what they do on offense. But for the Texans, the worry is they couldn't run the ball traditionally, right? Like they had to do Mixon's lined up wide and they do a jet sweep. And they just had to work really hard to move the ball on the ground. And I do think that there was a little bit of that helping them out last week, creating a bit more of a dynamic approach on offense. They weren't able to get that, and now all of a sudden they're into second and third and long, and are now putting Stroud in some obvious passing situations, and the Bears pass rush was able to get home. And so I do think that there needs to be maybe a bit more of a varied attack on first down, and be able to help grow them on the offensive side of things, because it was just... It wasn't great. And it was the first kind of, oh, maybe this isn't the same dominant team that we thought from a year ago. Not going to overreact. I still think they're going to be fine. I still think they're going to be a playoff team, and probably pretty convincingly. They get the Vikings this week. I feel good about them against Minnesota. For the Bears, the offensive line is very much an issue now. That was I don't want to say a vanilla defense, but a vanilla defense could have beat them. Like the fact that Houston figured out pretty quick, they can get to Caleb Williams almost anytime they want just by rushing 5. That became a problem very quickly because Williams, without the pressure, they said it, in the first half, he was 11 for 12, I think, for 80 yards. He was moving the ball when the Texans weren't blitzing. But they sent one extra guy. The offensive line couldn't pick it up, and Caleb Williams was getting killed. And now every defense is going to figure that out. Every defensive coordinator immediately saw that game. I was like, all right, going at him. Here we go. Almost any defensive coordinator. There are some who are going to be stubborn. And luckily for them, they face one of those stubborn defensive coordinators out in Indianapolis next week. But they spend a lot of money to bring in a lot of weapons to help out Caleb Williams. But I do think they needed to spend a little bit more money in protecting Caleb Williams because he was getting annihilated that whole game. And that is a real problem. But again, on the defensive side, this is a good football team. Sweat has been a difference maker. Edmonds made some big plays for them as well. They have a couple strong guys in the secondary. You look and it's like, yeah, this is This is a good defensive team, and they are going to give teams a lot of problems, I think, throughout the year. The San Francisco 49ers, I don't think there's a lot actionable from this game. They were kind of sloppy, and they just didn't execute in the way that they need to. I think they will be fine. We don't need to go 10 minutes on every team. San Francisco is going to be fine. They lost a road game in a place where we said in the preview that is a tricky home atmosphere to maneuver. For Minnesota, good for Sam Darnold. They look not legit in like a contender legit, but legit in like a they can probably finish at 500. And that is not good for the over-under totals that we picked, but not bad for them and for football watching, because we need more good teams right now. There was a lot of bad football being played this weekend. But Darnold gets rolling. We'll see about Jefferson. He gets that scare. But this is just, it's going to be an average football team that can catch some people sleeping at different times. I told y'all on Arizona that the Harrison overreaction was a little much in the concern about, oh, well, maybe this guy is going to be a bust. We do this after week 1 with everyone. We did this after the preseason with Jamar Chase. Oh, he can't catch the football. He's not used to the NFL. He's the second best wide receiver in the league. May have overreacted. He's going to be fine. This offense is good. He is so big and such a strong route runner. And Kyler Murray is back. He is legitimately back. What he was able to do against that Rams defense, the escapability, the throws on the run were incredible. There was so much to like about what Kyler Murray did on Sunday. And this offense, when it's rolling now, is scary. McBride underneath, Harrison kind of doing everything. Connor is a strong running back, and Kyler Murray creating. That team is good. The thing that caught me was this defense looked good. And now the Rams looked bad. And that is, I think, a big part of this whole equation is that the Rams looked kind of awful. But I do think that there is some excitement to be had about this about this Arizona team. Because defensively, even bad teams were putting up points against them last year. So at least we know they can limit them. But I thought they did a good job of rallying to the football, not giving a whole lot of room to Arizona to kind of, or to the Rams, sorry, to kind of create after the catch. I thought they did a great job of that. And then pressuring Matthew Stafford all game was good. There are real concerns about the Rams. Cooper Kupp gets banged up in this game. Without him and Nakua, this is kind of what we talked about in the lead up to the season. And this was one that I kind of wish I wouldn't have overreacted to, because they looked so good against Detroit. And Stafford looked so good against Detroit. And my concern was, going into the year, Stafford's getting a little bit older. They have guys who just look like they might be getting banged up a bit. And now we're buying them for 17 weeks. I just don't see it. And then after week 1, it looked good. It's like, okay, well, as long as they're healthy, they're good. And I kind of forgot that, okay, well, now they have to play again in a week. They don't get 3 months off. And it looked bad. It looked slow. It looked bad. And they were blown out before this game really even started. And I think this is back to, let's assume the Rams aren't a good football team moving forward. I'm done. I am officially out on Jacksonville. I thought that this was a team that injuries were the issue last year with Trevor Lawrence. Injuries were the issue with this team. I can't. I know Cleveland has a good defense, and I know I could still be completely wrong on this now. And I bought into them coming into this season. And so I should have, I shouldn't be overreacting in this way. But that looked so bad on Sunday. The offense couldn't do anything. And when the defense did give them some openings, Trevor Lawrence couldn't connect with his receivers. And I don't know if it's just his guys not getting open or what it is, but Brian Thomas is the only one out there making plays on this offense at all. Trevor Lawrence butts off a big run, but then he is missing some pretty easy throws as well. Defensively, this team stepped up and has limited now Miami and Cleveland in a couple of weeks, although limiting Cleveland is no great shakes. Josh Hines-Allen looks legit still. Defensively, I think this team is okay, but Trevor Lawrence needs to come a long way to get to the point where we thought he was. For Cleveland, like Watson tried to lose this game. He looked bad. Don't take anything positively away from this game offensively for Cleveland, but the defense is still really, really good. On to the Colts against the Green Bay Packers. If you're Indianapolis, how do you lose this football game? I genuinely don't understand how you lose to Malik Willis. They adjusted nothing defensively. And I know, like, Gus Bradley is no, we're going to run our scheme, and our scheme is our scheme, and that's going to do it. Josh Jacobs annihilated this team on the ground. That's the one thing the Packers can do with Malik Willis out there is have Josh Jacobs set themselves up. How? I am flabbergasted that is horrendous coaching and execution from the Indianapolis Colts. And you see the downside of Anthony Richardson, where the boom is big, but there is a lot of bust potential. If a couple of those big passes don't hit, they weren't able to really move the ball at all against a average to below average Green Bay Packers defense. So alarm bells going off, I think, around the Indianapolis Colts. I'm a little worried about Seattle. I have some concerns that the Seahawks have needed to grind to beat the Patriots and the Broncos, two teams who I don't think are very good. Now, two teams who will make you grind. But that was a little bit concerning. And I still think this is a playoff team. I love what this defense can do and some of the pressure that they can put on teams. But I am interested to see this team against an actual real challenge going forward, because these first two games certainly have not been it. Now, it's 2-0, but now they get the Miami Dolphins coming up this week. With the injuries that they have, that I don't know if that qualifies as a real challenge necessarily, but we will see. On the Patriots side, it is what it is, right? To come out of this stretch 1-1 is better than you thought it was going to be before they go into the Thursday night game against the New York Jets. And it's kind of what we thought it was going to be. The defense looks good. Ramondre Stevenson is the only thing that they have on offense, and the offensive line can't protect Jacoby Brissett. The thing that has surprised me about some of the reaction from some Patriots people that you follow is, okay, Jacoby Brissett isn't the answer. Bring in Drake May. It's like, everyone, have we forgotten? Have we forgotten what this season's about for New England? Because it's not about winning. I'll perfectly upfront with you. This season, not about winning. I don't think they're fully in the tank. But this season is about growth and development. And this season is about not getting your young quarterback killed. Yes, if the thought was, we want to come out here and be competitive in these games and win some of these football games, then no, Drake May 100% looked like the better quarterback in the preseason compared to Jacoby. Drake May looked so much better than Jacoby Brissett. Now, we've seen that the rookie quarterbacks who looked good in the preseason, that hasn't necessarily transferred all that much. But no, there was no doubt that if you thought this was a competitive football team who could go out there and win games, that Drake May was 100% the answer over Jacoby Brissett. The problem is what you are seeing through these first two games. That offensive line can't hold up to shit. And so you don't want your Drake May back there. You want him developing, learning, seeing the NFL, getting NFL coaching for a year, learning all of these situations, while not getting his brains kicked in every week behind one of the worst offensive lines in football. So that this offseason, you can go out, you'll get a very high draft pick, draft an offensive lineman, draft another offensive lineman, sign an offensive lineman, sign another offensive lineman, hope one of your guys around there develops into anything, and then you send Drake May out there in year two with all of this knowledge he has in that big old UNC brain of his, and he can go out there and thrive. This is, no, don't. We have proven over 2 weeks why you don't put that kid out there, because he would get Caleb Williams style killed in these games, and you simply do not want that going forward. The Steelers, that game happened against the Broncos. It never felt like they were in danger. But it always felt like, why? Like, they have the ball a bunch, it feels like, but it just perpetually 2nd and 8, 3rd and 6, something would happen. It's a run-first offense, we all know that. But it really does show that they don't have any confidence in Justin Fields as a quarterback right now, because they are playing so conservatively. And I get that's just Arthur Smith in general, and that was our frustration with him in Atlanta, but this offense looks bad. Najee Harris doesn't look close to as good as Jaylen Warren. They have one receiver that you trust in Pickens, who made one of the catches of the year on a play that was called back. This is not a threatening offense at all. The defense is very good, but this is not a threatening offense at all. For the Broncos, they've hung in a couple of games now, so that's good, but this offense is so bad. The only time they were able to generate any kind of a big play at all was on a weird, Nix is lined up wide, we do a wildcat snap, lateral it to him, he throws it deep downfield, and you caught the only 2 DBs in the league who still get fooled by that stuff, and they get a big play. Aside from that, easy throws are being missed. Easy reads are being missed. Passes are getting forced into windows they shouldn't be forced into. The running game can't get established at all. Now, again, it's against Pittsburgh's defense, which is quite good. And it's against Seattle's defense, which we think is going to be pretty good. But there are no signs of life out in Denver right now. They get Tampa Bay this week. I think the Bucs defense is good. I don't think it's great. So we'll see what kind of a test that is. Speaking of the Bucs, this is the second year in a row I told y'all. Why are we disrespecting the Bucs? And I did in the over-unders. I will admit that. But for them to be that big of an underdog going into this game against Detroit was a little insulting. And I think this is a legitimate win for them. I think the defense looked good. I think Baker was able to, again, control the ball, move things up the field. They can't get shit in the run game right now, but Godwin, for the 5th year in a row, was written off as, yeah, he's probably going to fall off. And he looks like a beast and looks like one of the steals of the draft in fantasy football this year. But this is a team that is going to be able to go out and catch some teams napping, I think, and be able to put together some pretty good football games. They're not, I still don't think they're a playoff team, but you have to actually pay attention to them going forward. For Detroit, this is a tough one. I think the old Jared Goff showed up in this game. Some very poor decisions, some very poor throws, and poor execution. They at least get Amon-Ra St. Brown back involved. Jamison Williams, they're using him in more than just quick underneath stuff. But it's almost like Goff has too many weapons now. It was easy when it was just, one read, Amon-Ra. Great, first down. One read. Amon-Ra's not there. Tight end. Okay, there we go. There's pressure on my face, dump to the running back. Now he has to actually, go through progressions and shit, and it's not working all that well. I do think this is just a one-off. I think they're going to be fine. This is a very talented offensive team. They're going to be okay, but this was just this isn't going to be the dominant run through everyone that we thought it was going to be. A couple other quick news and notes type of things. Giants are cooked. That's a bad football team. And to risk it with a kicker who was a little bit banged up in this game was a horrendous decision. But also, punters, be able to make kicks. I'm just going to put that out there. But yeah, Neighbors, that's a bad drop on 4th down. Daniel Jones doesn't look good at all. Singletary is trying, but there isn't a whole lot he can do. And then defensively, you only give up 21, which is great. But you allow Washington to get 7 scoring drives on you. I get all of them were field goals, but to allow 7 scoring drives against the Commanders, I would suggest is a problem. So that's a concern for this group moving forward. For the Commanders, they're not much better. This defense shouldn't have given up 18 points to the Giants and probably should have lost this game if the Giants had a functioning field goal kicker. Jaden Daniels is taking way too many hits. And that was going to be the knock coming in, but it's too many, and it's a concern. The Panthers are so clearly the worst team in football. The Chargers won a football game. That's about as much as we can say about that one. Monday night tonight, it's the Eagles taking on the Falcons. I would anticipate that the Eagles put on a pretty good show here. I think more defensively. I think that this is a Atlanta team that they have kind of a statue stuck back there at quarterback. They have weapons, and maybe he can get them to him, but there is nothing dynamic about this about this offense, and I think the defense will be able to just shut that down. No A.J. Brown is a concern for Philadelphia. I do think that this is now an opportunity for Devonta Smith to really show what he can do. I think this will be another good Saquon Barkley game. I do think Atlanta's defense is legit, though, and so under 45.5 feels like a pretty good play for this one, if you are so inclined. Okay, we'll hit the football graphic again and get into some CFL talk now, as it was a weird week in the Canadian Football League. All right, big week in the NFL, done, basically. Weird week in the CFL, wraps up. Only 3 games, and none of them make sense. And I will say, I do a best bets column for 3 Down Nation, and so not all of this is I got these things wrong, so obviously nothing makes sense. But it's just nothing makes sense for any of these. I just, aside from, they don't play the games on the spreadsheet, explain to me how any of that happened, or how we could have seen any of that happening. Toronto, 1 road win this season against a Montreal team who had their quarterback go down with an injury in that game. They have looked bad for several weeks in a row now. Aside from their quarterback has been putting up numbers. So maybe we should have read into that their quarterback's putting up stats and they're still losing. Eventually that should balance out. Maybe that was the thing that I should have read into. But they as a football team have looked bad since McManus went down with an injury. He was still hurt against an offense that looked amazing against the team we thought was the best team in the league last week. And not even close. Toronto kicks the shit out of them. Okay, well, weird things happen. On to the next game. Hamilton has spent exactly 0 seconds of this season looking like a quality functioning football team against Ottawa, who bounces back from a... Oh, sorry, speaking of bouncing, there goes the microphone. They bounce back from a tough loss against the BC Lions after they beat BC and beat them up a couple of weeks ago, which doesn't look all that impressive now. And they come in and shit the bed against Hamilton. It's like, okay, well, whatever. At least there's Montreal. And now Montreal, they feel like that X beside their name means they don't have to play a real football game for the rest of the year. They looked horrendous against a Calgary Stampeders team that I went to great lengths, both in the 3-down column and on the Friday preview, to explain how absolutely dog shit Calgary has been for the better part of the entire summer. And you only get a tie. None of that makes sense. And now we look at the CFL for the rest of the season. The one thing we knew is that Montreal was good and Hamilton wasn't. Aside from that, everyone's kind of bunched in. And now Montreal is fading into that pack a little bit. I'm not going to give Hamilton the credit of, well, they're coming in and now everyone, it's a 9-team parity. But if you are, and look, we talked about it, we had Deeds in the chat saying like, yeah, the Stamps kind of feel cooked. If you want to say that your team is cooked, I just got to tell you, I feel like every team has a chance. Saskatchewan hasn't looked great, but as a Rider fan, I still think there's a chance. Like, I can't imagine we get to the Grey Cup and it is the 2-1 seeds facing each other for the championship. Like, that would be genuinely surprising to me. This now feels so wide open. Any team can beat any team any week. And I get that is sports, but this is more than just a puncher's chance or anything like that. Like, legitimately, what separates... we're going to do power rankings in the CFL tomorrow. There is not much separating the number 1 team from the number 8 team. And there's even, I do think Montreal has the best roster. The Philpott news is a bummer, but I do think Montreal has the best roster. But even if we want to, just assume that this has just been a bad stretch and they're going to get it figured out, the difference between 2 and 8 is it's minuscule. So any given day, any of these teams can win. It is going to be a really interesting push to the postseason coming up in November. All right, that is it for the traditional stick and ball sports, at least for now. Let's shift to the face punching, as UFC 306, Noche UFC, went down from the Sphere this weekend, and the Ultimate Fighting Championship put on a show. Let's talk about it. UFC 306, Noche UFC, went down from the Sphere in Las Vegas, Nevada over the weekend. In the main event, it was Merab Dvalishvili getting his place on top the UFC's bantamweight division with a convincing victory over Sugar Sean O'Malley in the main event. That was the main event, but the main attraction was the Sphere. And I've said this in a couple of places now. I thought that the UFC did a great job with the Sphere. When you turn on and it's the prelims, it looked a little underwhelming. There was scaffolding and it looked weird. It was like, man, they spent all this and this is what we're getting. And then as the night goes on, it's like, okay, well, that's pretty cool. Oh, okay, well, that's pretty cool. All right, well, that's pretty sweet. Oh, and look at this go. And it just okay. Yeah, they put on a good show. Worth it, 100%. Don't know if they'll ever go back. I think they will. But that they put on a show worthy of that sort of a thing. And it looked different. It felt different. It was really fun for a night. As far as the fights go, and this was something I didn't cover on the instant reaction show because I didn't realize it. But I enjoyed this night. And then Dana White comes out and is like, yeah, I hope the people who came for the Sphere and were watching UFC for the first time because of the Sphere stopped watching before the co-main and main event. It's like, man, I get he's Dana White and he's going to the bros who just want oh man, Power Slap actually is the fastest growing sport in the world. You know, he's going after those guys. And so I get Dana's shtick, but at the same time, I thought that was quality mixed martial arts that we got. It was frustrating for Alexa Grasso to have that performance that she had. But, I thought Merab, it was an excellent execution of a game plan, and it was putting Sean O'Malley in a place he was uncomfortable in. Did a bit more, again, of a thorough breakdown on the instant reaction stream that I had before. And, but quickly, Cole's notes. Merab like set him off with the takedowns. But it was actually the counterpunching of Merab early on that really, I think, flustered O'Malley because he was expecting to have, I think, a relatively big edge on the feet. And I still think he could have, but he was not anticipating those counters. And I think that really set him back in this fight and really put him off balance. So I think there's concern there for Sean O'Malley. That is the thing to approach, is that, okay, you're not going to steamroll everyone. There's going to be resistance. How do you handle that resistance? And in a championship setting, he didn't handle it very well. Merab, though, recognized that, and it was just full throttle the whole way. It was an excellent performance. I thought his top control was great against a pretty skilled grappler to be able to control him in those ways and get the damage that he did, and to show enough on the feet to be able to execute the game plan. Spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. Really, really enjoyed what Merab was able to do and really kind of just showcase the abilities that he has had for so long and now gets to the top of that mountain. And the reaction is amazing because he was saying, like, look, I've always visualized, like, throughout this whole thing, I visualized beating Sean O'Malley. I knew I was going to beat Sean O'Malley. I never visualized this part, and there's a championship on him, and he just breaks down. That is the emotion that you love, and that is what I kind of wish Dana White would focus on a little bit more. Like, was it Chuck Vanderlei? No. Was it Griffin Bonner? No. It was a dominant performance from a guy who has worked his entire life for this, and he breaks down emotionally. I wish there would have been just a little bit, yeah, look, for people who tuned in for the Sphere, maybe you didn't get the most action, but you see like what these fighters go through and what this means, and the grind and the intensity that they have to go through to get to the highest level. And it just shows how tough this sport is and how unbelievable everything can be. And it's hats off to the effort that he put in tonight, instead of, yeah, the fight sucked. You know, I wish that kind of thing would have happened. Alexa Grasso disappoints in her fight against Valentina Shevchenko. It was what we talked about on Friday, where you give Shevchenko that amount of time to download all that information and really lock in on what Grasso does well and what she doesn't do well, and to kind of figure out, like, okay, this is how we're going to attack this. She's going to figure it out. The problem is there was no adjustment from Grasso. And, like, Shevchenko is an amazing striker and legitimately one of the best fighters to exist in women's mixed martial arts and just martial arts in general. That being said, this was not an overly complex game plan. It was in, right hook, takedown. That was it. It wasn't, oh wow, an impenetrable power double that you couldn't possibly have dealt with, or just these wild striking exchanges that put you on the mat. It's like, oh no, it's a punch and a takedown, and then it's good top control. You wish that Shevchenko could have advanced a little bit more and had a little bit maybe more urgency to create a finish in that sort of a way, but it was dominance. It was absolute dominance, and for Grasso, it was concerning that this type of a game plan would cause that much of an issue for her. Again, I couldn't stop Shevchenko from taking me down either, but I'm not the one fighting for a UFC championship. I would hope that for Grasso now to stay at this championship level, that the adjustments are made to be able to A, defend that, but B, to be able to come up with a plan B if your plan A isn't really working. And the other big story out of UFC 306 is Diego Lopez is the star. He comes out and a couple of times has Brian Ortega hurt. This was the biggest step up in competition he has had in his career, and it didn't look like it for a moment. He was excellent, and he is ready now to go into that championship sphere and make his way into that sort of a world. I think that he is ready now for another gigantic step up in competition. I think he's a future title challenger, probably before the end of the year. We're running out of time, but definitely by the end of next year. This guy's fighting for a championship at some point. So that was the story from the Ultimate Fighting Championship. What about boxing? As we had the face of the sport step back into the ring on DAZN and Amazon over the weekend. Let's talk about it. Canelo Alvarez with a convincing win over Edgar Berlanga in his fight for Mexican Independence Day weekend out in Las Vegas. I guess we can start with that. This was a weird pissing match between these two, with Canelo fighting at not MGM, why am I blanking? T-Mobile. With him fighting at T-Mobile, and with the UFC going to the Sphere. That was a weird thing. And, like, on the one hand, Canelo has always had these days, right? Like for a long time, he has been Cinco de Mayo weekend, Mexican Independence Day weekend. He's flirted around with some November, but he has been the king of these days. And so on the one hand, I can see how he's like, no, this is my weekend, we're going to do it. On the other hand, I don't know why you're splitting things with the UFC. And I don't think it's in Dana's nature, and I don't blame the UFC for being like, hey, just because you're this guy, like we're mixed martial arts, we're the UFC, we're ESPN, we're all these things, we're gonna, no, you don't just get it. We're gonna challenge it. And I don't think it split the audience as much. It looked like a full crowd in both places by the time the main events happened. The one issue, we saw a bit of a couple weird scorecards throughout the night. We have trouble with judges in esports anyway. To split two major events in the same place just feels like we are splitting a bit too much and asking a bit too much of these commissions. And so I hope this doesn't happen again. It was weird. It made for great content on the show this week. But it was too much. And so I hope that something is figured out here going forward. But in terms of the fight, this was the Canelo you want to see. I was worried in the Friday preview that he was going to be a little bit passive as he was against Munguia and kind of download the information. All right, we don't have a lot of, quite frankly, don't have a lot of relevant film on this guy. So let's go out, put some things together and see what we can do. That never really happened. He came out and he pressured right from the word go. He was all in the face of Berlanga, and I thought putting on a pretty impressive performance. And it was an aggressive Canelo, and it was a dynamic Canelo Alvarez. It was the type of Canelo that we wanted to see. And so, again, I am coming at this standpoint. I am unabashed Canelo Alvarez fan. I make no bones about it. He is absolutely my favorite fighter of right now. And he is one of those guys who I do believe is one of the great fighters of all time. And he is genuinely one of my favorite fighters of all time. That being said, it is like the glass half empty is, of course, he was doing that pressuring. This is like one of the, I don't want to say worst fighters he has faced in a very long time, but one of the fighters with the least amount of recognition and pedigree that he has faced in a long time. So of course he's going to go out there and pressure him because there isn't that concern of what a Berlanga is going to do. And Berlanga was there for the moment. He was fighting. He was brawling. He brought a bit of a fire out of Canelo Alvarez, which was really fun to see. But this wasn't a competitive fight ever. At no point were we like, oh man, maybe Berlanga takes it. Who knows? What are we going to see here? That was not this fight in any way, shape, or form. That was not this bout. And so I do think that this needs to be the last one of these, right? Canelo, the next fight needs to be against a higher level of opposition because this was a fun fight. It was great. It was not competitive, and we now need a little bit more from our Canelo Alvarez fights to get him back into that echelon. What that fight could be, we'll do fights to make after the big events coming up on Friday. That is going to be when we do that. We'll look at boxing rankings coming up on Wednesday's show. But like overall, it was a good night of fights. Lara against Garcia, certainly disappointed. Plant and Magumbi was a really, really fun fight, but Canelo, and look, again, if you're just looking for entertainment, which I think a lot of people are, quite frankly, I know I'm being kind of old, boring boxing head on this, but if you were just looking for entertainment value, I think you got it on Saturday night with Canelo Alvarez putting on a show. Didn't take many rounds off, put on a show against Edgar Berlanga. But now we get ready for more of a show coming up this weekend as we have a couple other fights to get ready for as we have another good weekend here in boxing. First, it is Munguia as he steps back into the ring this weekend. It is a fight on ESPN, and I'm interested in this one. I think that the main story coming out of this is that Canelo fight was the first loss for Jaime Munguia in his career. He is 27 years old, and he is, I think, a pretty exciting fighter. But now he has tasted defeat for the first time. How do you handle that? And not only has he tasted defeat, but I think there might have been, I don't want to say humbling, but that could have been a humbling experience, because I said coming out of that, I think Munguia, the way he fought, especially in the early rounds, but the way he fought, he would have beat anyone else in the world that night. He just happened to be facing Canelo Alvarez. That can go one of two ways. That can give you the confidence of, okay, I know I can hang with the best, so off we go into being the best. Or that can fuck you up and be like, man, I couldn't have done anything better and I still lost. What do I do? How do I do? What do I do? And so now, as he gets ready for this fight against Eric Bazinian, which again, Bazinian, I apologize, I'm butchering that. I know I am. What Munguia shows up? Does he now take this Canelo experience and turn himself into the best version of Jaime Munguia that has ever existed? Or is that a debilitating loss and he kind of just fades off into the night? So it's a very intriguing fight coming up on Saturday. What did he learn? Do we see a more mature Munguia? I still think that he needs to stick to his game and be a bit more of that pressure fighter, but we will see. The other big event that is happening, it is Riyadh season, as you found out a billion times. Joshua Dubois is going to be a very interesting fight. This one is absolutely, like, it is for the IBF Vacant Heavyweight Championship, which, by the way, fuck off with that. I know I did the rant on this on Thursday, but goddamn, like, Usyk Fury was for the undisputed heavyweight championship. Usyk gets this historic win. Hasn't fought since. Has another fight scheduled against the same guy. And we have to strip him of the belt. What are we doing? Why are we doing this? What? Why? It's so boxing, right? Like, you have this amazing moment and you could have, like, you can build into this. You would have, like, and I get the winner of this is going to get that, and then he's going to fight for that, and then it'll be undisputed again. But it is so dumb to do it this way, and so frustrating. So I guess that's the early story in this one, is that the fact that this is happening in the way it's happening is fucking stupid, and I hate it. But we are going to get a very good fight out of it, as Dubois takes a gigantic step up in competition as he faces Anthony Joshua. For Dubois, he is 27 years old, and he looks like a world beater. Like, he looks like a fighter. You put him on a poster, it's like, oh yeah, no, 100%, that's a guy. Like, if you made a boxer in a video game, you're making that cat. And now, coming out of that Usyk fight, we talked about it with Munguia. Do you take that experience against the best in the world, and do you grow from it, or do you cower away from it? He has grown from it immensely. He looks like a dominant fighter in the heavyweight division, going up against Anthony Joshua, who has looked like that at times, but every big fight he has had, it feels like he has the big one against Klitschko, and that's great. But in the last little while, every big fight he has had, he has come up short, whether it is a strategic issue or whatever it is. There has been a problem for Anthony Joshua. Can he stay focused on Dubois for this fight, for this camp? Was he focused for this camp? And can he stay focused for 12 rounds? Because he is, quite frankly, 24 rounds away from being the undisputed champion in what would really fuck up the legacy of this guy in a very complicated way. Because for so long, he has been a talented fighter who has won some big fights, but overall, this is going to feel like a bit of a disappointing career, which sounds crazy to say because he's probably made hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm sure he'd be fine with it. But when you look at kind of the legacy of what he could be and what the skill set probably should have lent him to be, it's not going to come close. But then, if he goes out and wins the undisputed heavyweight championship, well, who are we to say that he wasn't the guy and was a disappointment? Because you couldn't at that point, right? Like, you simply could not say anything. And so he is 2 fights away from completely rewriting his legacy, from going to, like, honestly, there's a couple of fights that haven't happened, and we know that. But for the most part, you go from very talented, couple missed opportunities, didn't take full advantage of his talent, to very talented, wasn't taking advantage of his opportunities, feels like a bit of a waste of potential, finally figures it out, and goes to the promised land. Like, it's a very, very different set of discussions around Joshua based on how these next 2 fights go for him. And so an opportunity to completely rewrite your legacy for Joshua is on the line. His last bout where he gets absolutely dominated by Usyk, and then it's the weird microphone thing when Usyk is trying to be very emotional about what his country is going through. Since then, he has absolutely just walked through guys. But the last one is Francis Ngannou, not really a real boxer. No one else is on this level. And so the question is Dubois? And what level is Joshua on? Like, there's just there's the back and forth of all of this. This is, I'm not going to say the best fighter that Dubois has faced, but every time he has faced a step up in competition, he has lost. And then he has come back and he's worked his way up to get back into that step up in competition, and he has lost again. But now, these last few fights, he has looked so good in getting ready for this championship opportunity. I am so excited to see what comes of this show this weekend. So more boxing talk as the week goes along. Now it's time to get back into the stick and ball sports. And we will start with the ball sports, basketball. More specifically, the NBA season is rapidly approaching. Our preview continues today with a look at the breakout players in the NBA. The NBA season is rapidly approaching. I cannot wait. And just in getting ready for the previews, that there is so much to be excited about in the NBA this season. And one of the things that's always fun is to see players level up, to see these breakout stars either reach the potential or surpass anything we ever thought possible for them. And today, we are going to look at 5 players who are candidates to really break out in that way this season. I'm going to start with an honorable mention, so I guess we're talking about 6. Benedict Mathurin for the Indiana Pacers. Injuries kind of slow him up, but I think, and now the main viewing I got of him was against the Raptors, who weren't providing the most resistance, but I do think that there is a player in there that can be a very dynamic and very exciting offensive player on a team that kind of allows that skill set to thrive anyway. That this is a guy who can step up in a big time way and can really go out there and make an impact offensively. I think he is not going to be the main option or even close to that on this Pacers team with Halliburton, Siakam, Turner as well, even Nembhard. Like he is down in the pecking order a little bit, but I think he has an opportunity, if he can stay healthy, to really come out here and show what he has offensively. That's already too much talk for an honorable mention. Number 5, this one's cheating, and so I'm not going to go super in depth on it. It's Victor Wembanyama. We're going to get into the top players in the league later on this week. He's not on there. He will be next year. And it's like I did this in the NHL one too. He is going to be the guy who comes out here and goes from being, top 10, top 15 to maybe top 3. He's going to get MVP votes this season. I am so high on him. And what really drove it home for me was the accountability episode we did the other day, where we went back and looked at the predictions from last year and what we can learn. And what we learned is that we weren't high enough on the potential breakout for some of these young players. Like Anthony Edwards took a step, and it took Minnesota far past what people thought they were going to be. Same thing with Oklahoma City. For a couple of years now, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has taken those steps and far surpassed expectations for Oklahoma City. I think that's going to be the same here with Victor Wembanyama. There is nothing he can't do. If he can stay healthy, and we just saw him do that, the sky is the limit for this guy, and there are actual pieces around him now. This is going to be a very good very good basketball player this season. At 4, a little bit of homerism, I have Emmanuel Quickly. I think that he and Scotty Barnes work really well together. I think that he was kind of lost a little bit in the Knicks offense, and then to come into the Raptors mid-season, it didn't click in the way that I think it can. And so maybe this is another Precious Achiuwa for me, and 3 years down the line, I'm going to be like, no, guys. This is the year he breaks out. But I do think that this is the year where, in Rakovic's offense, with Scotty Barnes as this kind of 1-2 combo, I do think that they are going to define some things. And so I think we are going to see the best version of Emmanuel Quickly that we have seen. And I think that is going to get him. No, I don't, this is not one where I think he's going to get MVP votes or anything like that. But I think we're going to kind of see the potential we thought we had in Emmanuel Quickly for a really long time. At 3, it's Jabari Smith. There are you could pick most of the Houston Rockets for this particular selection. But I do think that he is the one on the whole team that kind of stands out as the one who has the opportunity to really rocket, pardon the pun, into the stratosphere in the NBA. I just think there is a skill set there that really looks like it can be unlocked this season. And so I think this is the year that he takes a big step forward for the Houston Rockets. At 2, I have Kuminga. There is going to be a lot asked of him. There was a lot that was concerning about him last year and a lot of frustration with him. But I think that now there's no Klay Thompson. I'm not saying Klay was holding him back, but there's no Klay Thompson. It is Steph Curry and Draymond Green, and that's kind of it. They need Kuminga to step up. I think given this extra opportunity, he is going to really thrive in this role and step into the player that has been untouchable in trade discussions over the years and has kind of been that guy. And so I think Kuminga really breaks out this season. Just a quick note, Deeds, super appreciate the subscription. Thank you very much. Always love having you in the chats and love having you part of the Vampire League and very much appreciate the subscription. Thank you very much for that, Deeds. All right, number 1 breakout player. By the way, Deeds, Flames talk coming up here in just a second. We'll get to the hockey stuff here in a moment. But at number 1, it is Cade Cunningham. It has not been an easy time for Cade Cunningham with Detroit. And I think because of injuries and the general irrelevance of the Detroit Pistons as a basketball franchise for the last little while, we've kind of forgotten how good Cade can be. I think this is the year he reminds us. I don't want to say that they had this amazing offseason, but they did go out and add some actual veteran NBA players. They overpaid for Tobias Harris. You have to do that when you're Detroit, and you're bad. But there are actual real-life NBA players on this team now, and that's not something they've always had. And so I do think that given a step up in the quality of players around him, that we are now going to see Cade Cunningham start to reach that potential we thought for him when he was coming out of the draft and he was the obvious number 1 and he was the apple of everyone's eye and everyone was tanking for him. I think this is the year that he really does kind of reach that level. And I don't think he drags the Pistons into the playoffs, but I think the Pistons are at least going to be on like an in the hunt playoff board with a few weeks to go in the regular season. I think that Cade can get that team to that point, and that's why he is my number 1 target for breaking out in the NBA this season. All right, that's the NBA preview for today. Let's get into the NHL preview, as so many times we think all these teams are going to be unbelievable and amazing. How could it go wrong? And then it does. And we look back and say, you know what? Maybe we should have figured that out. Here are the overvalued teams in the NHL this season. NHL preview time. As the season gets closer and closer, we had rookie Young Star Classic tournament thingies happening all weekend, still happening out in Penticton with the Calgary Flames and all the other teams that are participating in that event. And so you go from that to training camp, and we go from training camp to preseason games, and we get excited about preseason games for about an hour, and then they're preseason games, and we don't care. And then we want to get the regular season going, and then we finally do. And so what I'm saying is the season's going to be here before we know it. And so today we are looking at the overvalued players and teams for the NHL. I'm realizing now I didn't copy over the players part into my notes, but we'll work with that. So we'll start with the teams, shall we? This is one, I know I was on Sportsnet 960 earlier this morning. I hyped it up as these are the overrated teams in the NHL. This first one I don't think is overrated. I'm basing overvalued off of points projections, and so I am sorry for my local audience here. It's the Calgary Flames. I don't think anyone's overrating them. I think the only people who are overrating them are the fine folks out in Las Vegas, Nevada, and the odds makers. The Flames' point total for over-under betting this year is 80.5. The Flames last year finished with 81 points. And that is a season where you got at least part or all of the season with Lindholm, Hanifin, Tanev, Shillington, Markstrom, Zadorov, Mangiapane. All of whom not there. All of whom have been replaced by Anthony Mantha and Jake Bean. And so yes, I do think that there is reason for optimism in Calgary, but not for results this year. I was flabbergasted to see the Flames at 80.5. I think that this is going to be a year of growth. I think it's going to be a year of development, but I also think it's going to be a year of maybe a little bit of bad hockey, especially on that blue line. I have great concerns about what this team is going to look like defensively this year. And when you have a basically rookie goalie behind a defense that has like 2 legitimate NHL defensemen on it, I don't know how this team gets above 500 this season. So again, I think we are going to come out of this season feeling positively about the Calgary Flames, but it's not going to be because they had a 500 season. I think that's... I was stunned by that. And so I know my audience tends to be a little bit more Calgary Flames leaning. And so if y'all in the chat want to let me know what I'm missing, that this team could get to a 500 record, I don't see it at all. Coming in at number 2, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Their total is at 90.5. They were at 88 points last year. Does anyone think the Penguins improved this offseason? I don't. I think that they have done actually a very bad job of building up around Sidney Crosby again. And you got one of the best Sidney Crosby seasons you could possibly expect last year. And still 88 points. And it's another year of wear on Carlson, on Letang, on Malkin, on all these guys. The goaltending issue, I don't think has been figured out. This is not a talented hockey team. And I think a lot of teams in the East got better. And I feel like a lot of teams in the East have passed by the Pittsburgh Penguins. And so I really do think that this is a year where the Penguins fall off. And I get part of the reason why they are at 90.5 is they are a what you would call a public team, but still, this is insane. So I think they are one of the, and honestly, like I put Calgary up there first because they were the first odds that I came to, honestly. I think Pittsburgh is probably the most overrated team in the NHL going into this season, and I don't know if it's that close. Up next, it is the Tampa Bay Lightning. They replaced Stamkos with Gensel, and I don't think people realize how much of a step back that is. It does seem to make, and look, long term, maybe it does make sense. But one of the things we talked about in the accountability episode is we need to not overvalue what we think of some decisions long term and apply those to the short term. And the main lesson of that was the Lindholm and Zadorov contracts, where I think that they are just absolute disasters long term for Boston. But that's going to make them better this year. On the other side, long term, getting a substantially younger Jake Gensel into the lineup instead of Steven Stamkos. Long term, makes sense. Short term, I think it's a step back. Stamkos scored 40 goals, I think it's 2 of the last 3 seasons, and 41 goals last year. Gensel didn't come close to that. I think Gensel is fine, but I don't think Gensel is a takeover games in the way that Steven Stamkos was. I think Gensel is maybe a bit more of a complementary piece than than people assume that he is. And no, I don't think Stamkos is going out there 1-on-5 and creating his goals. I think he got a lot of help from guys who are going to help Gensel out. And so I think Gensel probably has a good year, but I think that this is a step back for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And again, they have not looked threatening in a couple of years. And I think that it is going to be another season like that. So for them to get to 98.5, this could be a 95-point team and we still win this. So yeah, under 98.5 on Tampa Bay. I think that is way overvalued. Up next is Washington at 89.5. I just don't think they're that good. I think that so much of their focus is going to be on just spam feeding OV one-timers. I think they got a boost from trading some veteran players and some youth into the lineup last year, but I do think that they are going to take a step back. I think the league isn't going to be surprised by them. Maybe Liljegren is just the guy between the pipes and off Washington goes. But I don't look at this roster as a good one. I think the Mangiapane trade is not going to help them as much as they think. I think having Pierre-Luc Dubois there, we haven't seen that he helps a ton. I think that is kind of a net negative. And so I worry about Washington. I don't think they're going to be that good. And the last one is San Jose. 64.5 is tough to call a team overrated on. That's a 17-point bump from last year. And they do. They were historically bad last year. And they have better players this year. With Celebrini and Toffoli and who was it? Was it Barclay Goodrow that they claimed off waivers? They have added some good players to this team, for sure. but not a 17-point improvement, I don't think. I think that this is going to be kind of similar to the Bears in the NFL, where they may not have, like, they will feel better than a 65-point team, but they won't literally be a 65-point team. Deeds in the chat. How dare you, PK? Dubois is well known for building around his star players. Okay, can't keep a straight face. No, you're right. I gave Dubois so many benefits of the doubt, right? Yeah, with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I wanted to believe that accumulating that amount of talent would lead to success. And it very obviously hasn't. And so he has learned exactly nothing from that. The depth on this team is not built up well. He has not done anything to help supplement things around Sidney Crosby. This is a poorly constructed roster. And you could give Dubois a pass in year one because it was year one, and he's just trying to figure everything out. He goes out and acquires Erik Karlsson for no good goddamn reason. But now it's your fault. And now you need to fix it. And he hasn't fixed it at all. Okay, so now, just quickly, overvalued players. This isn't going to be a big fantasy hockey podcast this year. It's just, that one is not in the wheelhouse. So if I can get some guests sometimes to help with that, then yes. But in terms of my quick analysis on these things, fantasy football is going to be a bigger part of this show for sure. But just quickly, overvalued players in the NHL this year in fantasy. Evander Kane comes in at 5, ahead of Blake Coleman, Scheifele, Patrick Kane, and Clayton Keller. I'm basing these off of NHL.com fantasy ratings, and we all know how good NHL.com is at making lists, so maybe I shouldn't be. But I think Evander Kane is just showing more and more that he's falling off. And I get, like, in fantasy hockey, you get things for hits and stuff like that, but you kind of got to catch guys to hit them, and I don't think he's going to be able to do that a whole lot this year. So I do not have faith that Evander Kane is going to be able to put up a whole lot for Edmonton this season. And so him ahead of guys like Blake Coleman, who I think will have a bigger part of the Calgary offense this year and still does like the hits and all of those things that can help, is insanity to me. Number 4 and 3 are kind of together. It's Georgiev and Stuart Skinner at 51 and 52. But like Georgiev is just kind of meh. And so to have him in the 50s, I feel like at that point, you may as well just try to like stream goalies or something, because that feels like a waste of a pick to me. And Stuart Skinner, like, yes, he has an amazing bounce back in the playoffs and rides that wave to within one game of the Stanley Cup championship. He was pulled in the playoffs and also was horrendous at times in the regular season. And so to just assume that he is going to have this bounce back and be everything that you want him to be, I don't see that. So I think those guys in the 50s are quite insane. At 2, it's John Tavares, 62nd overall. Again, ranked ahead of Stützle, Zibanejad, and Tage Thompson. And Tavares, I don't think, is really going to be a guy who fills up other parts of the stat sheet. I think he is very obviously slowing down. I think there is a lot of concern about what's happening with this team in terms of some of the other star players. He loses the captaincy. And so I think to have him over a Tage Thompson, who puts up mega points, and Zibanejad and Stützle, I don't see it. And then at number 1, it is Jake Gensel, 31st overall in fantasy. Again, I think he's going to a good situation, so that helps. But I think part of it is I just don't think he is as good as everyone else around the league thinks he is. I don't see it in the ways that other people do with him. And so that is why I'm just out on Jake Gensel and on Tampa Bay this season. All right, let's put a bow on this one today with a look at the Calgary Flames. A lot of my Calgary Flames video content this year is going to live over on Game Over Calgary. Go subscribe to that channel now, please, so we can go live this year. But yes, I do think that this is going to be a team that this is going to be a year where there isn't going to be, like, on this channel, video wise, I don't know how much Flames there's going to be. Probably still some. I'm not going to ignore them completely. I know where a lot of you guys know me from. So I'm going to try to find that balance here. But today we are going to look at the Calgary Flames, and we are going to look at the players who I think could break out for this Flames team this season. So Calgary Flames season preview starts now. Change the color behind me. Calgary Flames season preview. This is, oh boy, I can't get any of the lights to work with that. This isn't gonna, we just talked about it. If you're watching the full episode, this isn't going to be a great year for the Flames. It's going to be probably very frustrating for this team. But I do think that there is the opportunity for a lot of these guys to break out. You're right. Deeds, very fancy. I think that there are going to be a few opportunities for the Flames to really bounce back in, maybe not even bounce back, but just kind of have breakthroughs this year. Sorry, I am now totally messed up by the lighting kind of switching when I go from orange to blue in the background. But let's start with, I think the most obvious one. It is Dustin Wolf. He has not put up the NHL numbers that a lot of people want him to, but he has, I think, so much potential. And you look at how he was utilized last year, there would be weeks where he wouldn't play games at all. It was a weird situation with, like, okay, you're the third, first of all, everyone assumed you were getting traded, or that someone in front of you was getting traded. Probably Vladar for a 7th round pick, or they were going to have to attach a 5th round pick to get him the fuck out of town. And then he wasn't, and you were in the AHL all year last year. And then you have a weird situation where there's like a couple of injuries and he's banged up, but he's still not going to start a whole lot. So he's just kind of sitting there and his playing time is inconsistent. You are playing behind a team that is constantly changing. And then you are backing up a goalie who was asked, hey, do you want to be here? And he was like, you know what? I'm good going to New Jersey instead. And they're like, okay, sweet. You're staying. And so it was a weird situation all around. And I think this year, with consistent playing time and consistent opportunities for Dustin Wolf, he is going to break through and show everyone at least the potential. Now, that probably isn't going to show up statistically. The goals against average is probably going to be pretty high because the defense sucks. And the save percentage might actually be high because he's probably going to face a whole lot of shots. But I would caution against looking at the stats for Dustin Wolf this year because I do think that they're not going to tell the whole story of how well he plays. And so honestly, it will probably lead me to be able to use him as a breakout candidate next year as well, because the stats aren't going to be there. But I think that he is definitely a guy who has a breakout type of a year. The next one is Jacob Pelletier, as he, I think, mainly has been held up by injuries all season, or all his NHL career. And that has been very frustrating because I think there is a really good hockey player in there. And I don't think we're ever going to see top line Jakob Pelletier, but I do think that we see like a very productive middle six type of a guy. Like I kind of envisioned the role for him that Pospisil plays right now, where he can like go up on the second line and contribute and cause some havoc and help things out. And if you need him back a little bit further, maybe a checking role, he can do that as well. I kind of view him in that way. And I think this year we're finally, if he can stay healthy, we're finally going to see what this kid can do and be able to put it all together. I think there is a skill set there to be a very important player for the Flames going forward. And so he is one that I think really breaks out. This third one is a bit more of a long shot, but I'm going to call my shot on it anyway. I still think Jeremy Poirier breaks out this year on the Calgary Flames. I get it. He lost a year of development last year, and the last bit of hockey that we saw from him didn't look spectacular. Fully understand that. He was coming back from a fairly traumatic injury. And so the obvious thing, because I thought last year was going to be the growth and development year for him, and then he's kind of knocking on the door by the end of the year, and then this year it's no doubt he's making it on the team. And I think a lot of people are just kind of, okay, well that didn't happen last year, but now off he goes. I still think a year of maturity, while you don't get that on-ice development, I still think that he strikes me as someone who is getting that coaching and getting all of that. And yeah, like jumping back in playoff time isn't an easy thing to do. I think now with a full off season to get ready and now a full training camp to build up. I don't know if he breaks camp year one or day one with this team, but I do think that he is going to, I think he could have different positions, obviously. But I think that he has the potential to kind of follow the same trajectory as a Pospisil last year, where Pospisil just kind of got an opportunity seemingly out of nowhere and just ran with it and never really let it go, and it kind of caught everyone off guard. I think that is going to be the Flames' Poirier this year. I think that he is going to be the guy who steps up and has those sorts of games for Calgary. And so that is the guy who I think has an opportunity to step up. Quickly in the chat, Deeds. Basha looks good, has looked good at the Young Stars, and Lipinski and Parekh are making me excited for the preseason. That's fair. And I think Parekh is going to dazzle in preseason. I think he's going to be a blast. I still think, I know, even the conversation today I had with Shannon GVP over on 960, asking okay, who's going to be on the NHL roster first? Is it going to be Brustevich or is it going to be Parekh? I would caution against Parekh this year. But I do think that he is so, I feel so confident that he's going to be a legitimate number one defenseman in this league with his offensive instincts already. And from everyone you talk to around the Ontario Hockey League, the IQ that he has and the work ethic that he has, he's going to figure out the deficiencies in his game. And I think that is going to be a very exciting player. And Lipinski is an interesting piece as well. There's a lot of guys. Stromgren for me is the one who's kind of catching attention, and just the style of play that he can do at 21, I think he is tantalizing, to say the least. And so I think that there are a few guys who have an opportunity to maybe break through. The issue with Lipinski and with Stromgren is forward kind of seems set with the Flames, but you're right. At least preseason, you're going to get some guys that can show up a little bit. And so whether it's games down at the Dome or when the kids travel out on the road to Seattle or Edmonton 8 times or whatever it is in the preseason, which is too long, by the way, but you're at least going to get some flashes, and it's going to be very interesting to see. So also I missed Deeds from before. Does Skinner truly come back as good as he was, or is he just a flash in the pan? No Edmonton hate, just not honestly sure. I do think that Skinner is an NHL starting caliber goalie. Do I think he is as good as some Oilers fans will lead you to believe? No. Is he a savior in net? No. But is he going to be good enough to not cost them quite a few games and just help Draisaitl and McDavid and all those guys kind of thrive? Yeah. He's going to be good enough to not get in the way, I think, personally. I don't think he's going to steal a lot, but I don't think he's going to lose him a lot either. I think he's probably, I don't think he's going to be full bust or anything like that. So probably not flash in the pan, but I don't think he's going to be this. I don't think there's another level to his game, to be frank. I don't think that this is a guy who breaks out in this Vezina caliber role or anything along those lines. I think he just kind of is a good goalie, and that is an upgrade over a lot of the stuff they've had in Edmonton for a while. Certainly. But breakout dynamo guy, no. Nope, don't see that for him at all. So, that's that. All right, this was a long one today. The stream going for about an hour and a half. So, thank you, Deeds in the chat, and anyone else who has hung out and watched today. Greatly appreciate it. Going to be back on streaming today, doing the more traditional Twitch video game playing, coming up 2 o'clock is when it is scheduled for. And going to be back on here tomorrow. I have a couple of things up in the air. I'm going to be on the CFL this week with the Ticats Audio Network, and that gets taped in the morning and then comes out a little bit later on in the day. But then there's some real life stuff that just not serious, just stuff I have to do. So tomorrow might be a pre-tape today, and so we may not be back live here, but 100% gonna be live here 10 a.m. on Wednesday for another one. And that day, NFL power rankings. We'll do some fantasy football stuff, more NHL, NBA preview. So video game today. Keep it locked on my social medias for Tuesday. There's definitely going to be an episode, but it might just be a podcast and a YouTube video. And Wednesday, we'll be back live here on Twitch. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will talk to all of you a little bit later on today. Have a great day, everybody.